Welcome to Issues and Answers with your host, Ann Jfk Jr. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. And now, Issues and Answers with your host, Ann Jfk Jr.
Welcome to the program. I'm Ann Jfk Jr. In a blink of an eye, 25 years have passed. A quarter of a century has passed. That's since President John F. Kennedy's only son piloted and then perished in the plane that he was flying, that along with his wife and his sister-in-law. Do you remember when you heard the news? I certainly did. Does it seem like it was 25 years ago? No, it doesn't. John F. Kennedy's tragic death shocked the world in 1999. And many still wonder what caused the death. Was it the Kennedy curse that caused so many deaths and hardship in the Kennedy family? Or was it something else? In the program today, we're going to talk to somebody who believes it was something else. Please stay with us as we discuss 25 years ago, what happened to John F. Kennedy Jr. and what maybe could have prevented it. Stay with us. Requiem for Camelot. What's Camelot? Well, we know Camelot, the Kennedy family. Such a long history of service here in our country and a long history of tragedy. And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, 25 years ago, a quarter of a century, was when John F. Kennedy Jr. piloted a plane and then died in the plane. Was it the Kennedy curse or something else? And my guest today, the author of this book, Dr. Diehl, is going to tell us it perhaps was something else. Thank you for being a part of the program. Dr. Diehl, and you've written a number of books, you've been a guest, and this book is a little bit about whistleblowers that help all of us, because they point out, they blow the whistle on things that are not happening correctly in our government. And Dr. Diehl, Ann Diehl, is a whistleblower and proud of it.
Yes, oh yes.
Why are you proud of it?
Well, when you work for either the government or industry, and of course we've seen this with Boeing lately, the book also deals with the problem with Boeing. Whistleblowers are the canaries in the coal mine. They warn the public and officials what really needs to be happening, and when you allow either industry or government to savage these people, fire them or harass them, then bad things happen, and that's what happened to John Kennedy. Let's
go back 25 years ago. Tell us briefly, because there's so much more to discuss about your book, what happened to John F. Kennedy. Of course, he's the son of President Kennedy. He's the only son of President Kennedy, and he had his own magazine that he started, George. Yeah. He was married, he was in New York, he was an attorney. I think he was popular because I think he had to pass the bar 3 times, but he did. I think he was named the sexiest man alive. Look at this gentleman on the cover of your book. But his death shocked the world. How could this happen to another Kennedy? Because his uncle was assassinated, his father was assassinated, and now he died. And so much more.
Yeah, well...
But you think it couldn't have happened, but bring me back 25 years ago. He was flying from New York, going to a wedding.
This is America's prince, and he's married to a lady by the name of Carolyn, and she's a little bit like Diana in England. She's overwhelmed by the paparazzi, so the marriage was beginning to get in trouble. He had a lot of baggage that day that he took off. Carolyn, his wife, was mad at him.
He was flying from New York.
Actually, he left from New Jersey. Going initially to the island of Martha's Vineyard, and then he planned to go on to Hyannis for his nephew's wedding. Rory was getting married.
Wedding.
Yeah, so this is a must-do occasion. And
he left a little late, and people were late getting to the airport. Okay, and the weather was turny, but he was a novice pilot. That's the point.
Yeah, he had planned this trip days before, and he was only going to go if the weather was very good, visual conditions. He was going to fly during the day. These were airports he'd flown to before, but this was a new aircraft. He'd only had 36 hours in it and only 9 hours flying by himself. So matter of fact, that was one of the raps on John Kennedy, is that he had flown most of his 300 and some hours with an instructor. So he hadn't made a lot of decisions on his own. So now
he
he's...
didn't make a lot of decisions on his own, and the decision was not to take a co-pilot with him. That's one of the decisions.
Absolutely.
And these decisions all have something to do with why we're talking about the decisions.
Well, he had an offer from what they call a certified flight instructor who knew Kennedy, said, I'll go with you if you want. But because Kennedy thought they'd be flying in the daytime in good weather, he thought he could do it safely. But he had not had a type of training we'll talk about in a few minutes. He made a series of judgment errors. Not taking the instructor was certainly one of them.
One of them. Going a little later in the day, it was the second one is going to get dark sooner because they started later, and the third one, the weather was changing. He may not have checked that out, and also I don't think he contacted one of the towers to say where he was. A lot of decisions.
Yeah, he didn't talk to the
Of course,
FAA.
I'm not the expert, but this is what I learned from the book.
Diane, you're really onto the story. Yeah, he thought the weather was going to be good. He never checked it, and literally a minute after he took off from that airport in New Jersey, the weather turned to marginal visual conditions. There was going to be haze out that night, which he didn't know about. Now, one of the things we teach in these judgment training manuals is you can't see clouds or haze at night. In a dark night, first thing you know, you're into it, and then all of a sudden, non-instrument rated pilots panic, and he made all these mistakes because he had not received the training that he should have.
Folks, that's kind of the key to this program, that Al Diehl helped develop this program, this manual about training, but he became a whistleblower on another issue, and he believes because of that, this training was not continuing for pilots like John F. Kennedy Jr. and so many more. That's it in the nutshell.
The essence of it, that's it.
The essence of it, that you helped develop this aeronautical decision-making for student and private pilots. This talks about decision-making. This talks about what questions to ask. This was in effect, but it was pulled out of government, federal government, for pilots like John F. Kennedy and others. And you feel it's because?
Well, it's because they were mad at me for exposing the administrator lying to Congress. It involved automobile safety seats. The airline executives didn't want parents to bring those things on the aircraft. I'd seen the bodies of infants in crashes when I was an investigator, so I knew, well, it affected me, okay, and so I just knew we couldn't allow even the administrator, especially the administrator, to lie to Congress. And of course...
And he lied to Congress. You were working for the FAA.
And basically...
And you were a former, I didn't even introduce you, as a former National Transportation Safety Board investigator for the NTSB, of course the whistleblower, and of course the author of this, but I apologize, I was getting so involved in John F. Kennedy Jr., as we always do, that I forgot to introduce your qualifications for this. But you were working for the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, and one of your bosses testified before Congress that these child safety seats weren't going to be effective on a plane.
They wouldn't protect infants, which was a lie. And so
it was a lie. So you heard the working, your jaw dropped when you heard them saying, what, it doesn't? When you have studies upon studies showing that these car seats would help protect a child.
And of course, I'd seen the bodies of the infants in the morgue, which convinced me, you know, you don't forget that. And so I decided we can't let this pass. And of course, whenever you do that, you're told you need to leave Washington.
So what did you do when you heard that he testified that these weren't effective?
We sent, I and another scientist, Dr. Bill Shepard, sent 5 studies that the FAA had done and was aware of that said they do work, basically.
You sent them to who?
The chairman of the Congressional Oversight Committee, who had just been lied to by the administrator. Well, obviously, I'm sure they contacted the administrator, said, what's with these studies that contradicted what you said? And at that time, the Sky Marshals belonged to the FAA, so these are the detectives that have the guns and badges. They're licensed to kill. They're like FBI agents. So they came to me and said, you need to leave town. The administrator is quite angry at what you did. So the Air Force has just offered you a job. Get out of town quickly. And so
Now, do you have anything in writing about you? I mean, they didn't fire you, or did they? Or did they say, take this other job? What evidence do you have?
I was told that if I didn't leave, very bad things would happen to me. And remember, these are cops with guns that are licensed to kill. And when they tell you, Doc, you need to take that job with the Air Force and leave right now. We don't care if these studies aren't done. You get out of town. And so I realized, of course, I got to be honest, the Sky Marshals at that time this is 1987 time frame, the Cubans, many Cubans, and there was even one, not a Cuban, but somebody here in Albuquerque hijacked an airplane. They were hijacking airplanes, and I didn't want these Sky Marshals shadowing me. I knew they needed to be watching the airports. So that was another reason why I decided, yeah, I think it's time for me to take the job with the Air Force Safety Center and leave Washington.
And we're going to talk about that, but just a quick question. If you gave these studies to Congress, I don't see any child safety seats on planes today, Al Diehl.
The FAA is still taking sort of a hands-off approach, unfortunately. Many European countries mandate the seats for infants, children under 2 years old. The FAA has basically said, we'll leave it up to the individual airlines. Now, there's an issue about if they force the parents to buy a second seat, many of the low-income parents may decide to drive their cars instead, which is actually statistically more dangerous than being in an aircraft.
But can't you just take a child seat out of your car and put it in the plane?
Well, the problem is you're safer. The child is probably safer in an aircraft, even without a child seat, than he is in a child seat, or she is.
No, but last question on this: you can't take the car seat out of the car, unbuckle it, and bring it onto the plane.
You have to check with the individual airlines.
Okay.
It's up to them.
Okay.
So
that issue, despite you sending Congress 5 studies saying it's more effective, we don't really have mandated today. But we have it mandated.
They never did.
They never did. Okay. Glad to clear that up. Moving on to your job now with the United States Air Force, after you left as a whistleblower.
Well, it was kind of interesting. After I took the job with the Air Force, first call I got from them, and they said, look, you're technically not an Air Force employee, but we've got a mission we want to send you on, and it could be dangerous.
Are you kind of thinking, they're going to get me this way?
Well, I was an Air Force Academy cadet. My dad was in the service. I said, sure, what's the mission? They said, we can't talk about it on the phone, but you'll get a call from the State Department. And the next thing happened is my phone started ringing, and people said, what in the heck did you do now? We heard about the whistleblowing on the kiddie seats, but why are FBI agents interviewing us about your background? And we've got CIA people asking us, are you reliable, and are you really an expert on plane crashes? And they lied, I guess, and said I was both. And so the Air Force said the White House wants you to go investigate this presidential crash in Africa. The People's Republic of Mozambique had a progressive leader that overthrew the Portuguese government, and the communists were backing him, the Soviets. But then he decided to become Ronald Reagan's friend, and the Kremlin didn't like that. And he got on a Soviet aircraft and crashed. And Ronald Reagan wanted to know, was he assassinated, or was this really a plane crash? So they sent me over undercover. Because of the sanctions against South Africa, I had to go undercover. Officially, the U.S. government couldn't help out the South African government. This is the apartheid government now. So I went over undercover, and in the end, I concluded it looked more like an assassination than an accident. The Russian crew had screwed up, just like they are in the Ukraine. We know they're not doing very well compared to the Ukrainian armed forces, but basically.
Well, how many perished in that accident?
Who perished?
Who died?
Well, that was his name was Samoa Michel. He was the president of the People's Republic of South Africa, but more importantly, he was Nelson Mandela's role model. Nelson Mandela was in Robbie prison, and he was watching this Mozambican president declare a multicultural society, no amnesty for everybody, we're just going to live together, no fighting.
But he died.
And he was killed.
But he died along with the pilots and everybody else.
And yeah, 20-some people were killed. including the president.
But you determined it was an assassination?
What I reported to the CIA and the State Department and presumably to the White House, that it looked more like an assassination. The Soviets are very good at covering their tracks.
But what has that to do with your whistleblowing and about the training and such?
Well, the interesting thing is, what I'm saying is, when the FAA fired me, I ended up with a great job with the Air Force for a while, until I was assigned by the Air Force. This was after the Mozambican crash. Incidentally, Samoa Michel was killed, of course. Nelson Mandela married his widow. Okay, so she was the only first person to become First Lady in two countries, South Africa and Mozambique, but that's another story. And later,
are you going to write a book about that?
Well, as a matter of fact, in this book, I think they may have the pictures in the control room of, and I only learned about this 2 years ago, that there was a KGB major that was involved at this time, and his name was Vladimir Putin. And you can't make this up. I didn't know about this, but somebody sent me a picture saying, here's Vladimir Putin with President Samoa Michel 3 days before the crash. He was only a major, he wasn't president. This is 1986 now. He was just a major, and his job was in East Germany, Dresden, East Germany. But what's he doing in the capital of Mozambique? And of course, the Kremlin denies that that's really him. It's just somebody that looks like him. But boy, if that's not him. But anyway, the mystery was whether the Soviets had killed him or whether the South Africans had. Both countries hated him for various reasons. He'd befriended the Americans. He wouldn't give the Soviets a submarine base. And of course, he was showing his South African natives, the blacks majority there, that we could maybe form a multiracial society, and that's what happened in South Africa.
And you studied, and then what happened with you with the Air Force?
Well, I was sent by Reagan to look at that accident, but Bill Clinton got into an embarrassing situation. This was in April of 1994. I was the chief civilian at the Air Force Safety Center, and two Air Force F-15s. Now, I'm not a critical of Air Force fighter pilots. My brother's one. But anyway, they shot down, unfortunately, two U.S. Army Blackhawks. They killed 26 people, including 14 foreigners from Britain, France, Turkey, and Kurdistan. This is between the two Gulf Wars. And so Bill Clinton's phone rang, and it's the Prime Minister of Great Britain saying, "What's going on, Mr. President?" And Clinton said, "We'll get to the bottom of this. It was the worst fratricide since Vietnam. I was told to investigate it, but I knew a secret. Much like with John F. Kennedy Jr., the pilots that did the shooting had not received training. It was a different training program that I developed."
That's where we're getting to. It's all in the training. Yeah. So at the beginning of the program, when I said, is it the Kennedy curse or something else, your belief is, if he had received as a private pilot this training, this manual that you had helped write, and now if this other pilot, commercial pilot, had received, I think it's called the crew
resource management.
Crew
resource GRM.
That was pulled as well.
Well, it's the law of the world now for airline pilots. If you're an airline pilot, you have to receive crew resource management. If you're a private pilot, you don't have to receive, on paper, theoretically, you need to receive aeronautical decision making, but I'm telling you, it's really not mandatory like crew resource management is for airline pilots. When I went to work for the Air Force, they asked me, would this work for Air Force pilots and air crews? And I said, of course. And what I knew when I was assigned to investigate that fratricide over northern Iraq was that the F-15 pilots had not received that training. Same kind of thing. This is not about my whistleblowing, but the general said, I don't like this. I don't think it's a good military training program. My fighter pilots are not going to get that training. And then communications broke down between the two fighter pilots and the Air Force radar plane that was watching them. They shot down these U.S. Army Blackhawks, killed 26 people, including 14 foreigners. So now Bill Clinton had a problem. he had to explain to these other heads of states that wasn't going to happen again, and they were going to investigate it. And I was told, pack your bags, you're on the investigation. And I sort of hinted that, well, they didn't get CRM training. And I was told, oh, you can't go into that. You can't mention that because the president's going to release this report and it'll be embarrassing to the Air Force. And I said, we've got to mention it. And so the Air Force, when I refused to go along with the cover-up, same thing happened, except the Air Force actually did fire me from the safety center and sent me over to the testing center at here at Kirtland. So,
well, how did you blow the whistle? Did you actually blow it, their cover-up? Did you tell anybody about the cover-up?
I refused to go along with the cover-up, and they knew that the report would come across my desk, and then I would I would complain that they didn't mention the lack of CRM training. So
but
they had
you didn't expose that to Congress or anything?
Yes, I did. Later on, as a matter of fact, I decided there's more problems than that, and it's not just the Air Force. The Navy and the Army have similar problems. So I wrote a whistleblowing complaint to the President, the Secretary of Defense, and the leaders of the Congressional Oversight Committees, and the Inspector General called me in, the Pentagon Inspector General, and basically told me, you know, you've embarrassed the Secretary of Defense, and we work for him, so you think we're going to support your whistleblowing, that this accident could have been, this is the fratricide, could have been prevented? And I realized that, whoops, no one's going to protect a whistleblower. The problem with whistleblowing is if you embarrass somebody that's a low-ranking person, oh, that's fine. They love that. But if you investigate or complain about or expose a cabinet officer, you got a problem because the inspector generals work for these cabinet officers, and they're not about to. So
you're saying with the harassment, and what you say in your book is there is harassment involved, not just losing your job, but harassment that can be involved as well with whistleblowing.
Well, what happened after I blew the whistle and got demoted, the Air Force had a big problem. So they decided to convene a blue ribbon panel. And remember the administrator, he was a retired Navy vice admiral. He was no longer FAA administrator, but they put him in charge of investigating my complaint. So now you've got the guy who I exposed for lying to Congress investigating my complaint. And surprise, surprise, Diane.
He didn't find anything wrong.
He said, Diehl's a disgruntled employee, and don't pay any attention to what he's saying. That was in 1994 that the shoot down occurred. 95, he issued the report giving the Air Force a clean bill of health. In 96, Bill Clinton put Ron Brown and 34 other people.
That's the Commerce Secretary.
Yeah, he was the Commerce Secretary under Clinton, and supposedly one of his best friends. And the plane hit the mountain, and the pilots had not received crew resource management training. So you see, when you go after whistleblowers, there are long-term consequences. So
that's the point of your book. We've got a couple minutes left. So the end of the story with John F. Kennedy Jr. is he did not, because of your whistleblowing, you wrote the aeronautical decision-making for student pilots. They pulled this training. You believe because this training was not given to people like John F. Kennedy, the crash occurred, a chain of events.
I and other people have said, including the people that investigated the accident, they thought the training would have prevented his death, because in the training manual, many of those mistakes, you mentioned 4 of them, they're covered in the training manual. Yeah, he didn't.
And there was a chain, all of these taking off late, not having someone fly, having few hours in a new plane, having a new weather system come in, all of these things combined, if there was a break in the chain, the tragedy.
If he made one less mistake by reading those manuals, he would have lived. Unfortunately, everything lined up, and he and his wife and sister-in-law died.
Why did you write the book?
I wanted the public, first of all, the rumors that he was a cowboy, a reckless pilot that did a lot of things he shouldn't have done. I didn't think that was right. And of course, there's another book out there that said it was a murder-suicide. He was mad at his wife and his magazine. No, yeah. That was nonsense. Other books have said it was the CIA that killed him because Al Gore apparently had been thinking about putting him on the 1980 ticket to run for president. And of course, I'm sorry, 2000 ticket. Excuse me. In 2000, Gore had approached his people to see if
why would the CIA have been involved with it?
Well, he told friends that someday he was going to find out what what or who killed his father.
Oh boy,
So,
what a full circle this
yeah,
is.
so
Al
now
Diehl.
he's the vice president. You know, if he'd been on the ticket
Oh boy.
in 2000, it might have been
Wow,
different.
all these conspiracy theories. So you wrote the book to put your spin, your idea of what could have happened.
I thought the public needed to know that he was not crazy, it was not suicide, and I don't think the CIA killed him.
Maybe you would have sold more books if you said all those things.
Well, that's I had to write what I believed, Diane. You know me.
The training, we still don't have this training?
We sort of have it. There was one associate administrator in FAA that opposed it. Short answer is they're doing a better job now, but not in time to save John F. Kennedy, and they're still not doing a great job with that. Unlike CRM, which is really absolutely required of airline pilots. When you board those airliners,
Good.
your pilots have had judgment training and teamwork training. Private pilots, we still haven't. We saw.
So you're saying this judgment training, we should feel confident flying. You've always
on an
said
airliner,
that.
yes. If you're flying in a private plane, you might ask your pilot if he's ever heard of aeronautical decision making.
Where can people find your book?
It's on Amazon. Short answer.
And what are people saying about it?
Well, the people that have read it said, including some experts, I certainly learned a lot because I tie this all back to what's happening in Boeing. Remember, that was a whistleblowing.
And we may have to have you back for that.
Yeah, that's another tragic story of John Burnett. As a matter of fact, I dedicate the book to, of course, John Kennedy and to Ron Brown, who was the Secretary of Commerce, killed unnecessarily, and to John Burnett, who apparently committed suicide because Boeing allegedly was harassing him as a whistleblower. So we pay a tremendous price. And of course, we know about the MAX aircraft, crashed twice, killed 346
and
people.
And the door blew off.
That was later.
That was last.
We
just
were
recent.
lucky. No one got seriously hurt when the
lot.
door blew off. But I proposed some things that we could do to fix Boeing's problem.
As well as in this
And
book.
it's in the book.
Requiem for Camelot. Whistleblower reveals why JFK Jr. died. Dr. Alan Diehl, thank you so much for taking time. Fascinating stories that we don't hear every day from Dr. Al Diehl. Thanks for watching. I'm Diane Kinderwater. Make it a great week with your family. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Issues and Answers with your host Diane Kinderwater is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program or to purchase a copy of any Issues and Answers program, visit sunbroadcasting.org or call us at 505-345-1991.